All right, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in with us at Birch Aquarium. I'm a familiar face. Hello from Caitlin. I am broadcasting from my house here in San Diego, but we have a brand new guest today who you guys probably don't know. This is Mike, who is a very important member of our Aquarist team. You might have seen him on our Instagram recently talking about the behind the scenes wave machine above our giant kelp forest. So we're really excited to welcome him today to tell you guys all about working at Birch Aquarium, all about our really amazing exhibits, and to give you a behind the scenes scoop of what's going on with their jobs. So, hi, Mike, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Mike. I'm one of the aquarists here at Birch. I've been here roughly about 5 years, be 5 years in July. And currently I actually take care of our cygnathids, so primarily our seahorses and our seahorse breeding room. And then in the past, I've taken care of our kelp forest exhibit as well as our local gallery. And I do a bunch of coverage on other things. So I'm excited to talk to you guys and get your questions, and let's explore.
Yeah, so if you have any questions for Mike or any questions just about our exhibits or our giant kelp forest, which we are looking at live right now, please feel free to put those in the comments and we'll be answering those throughout the next 45 minutes or so. And then also let us know where you guys are from. We've had people tuning in from all over the world, which is very exciting to us. And we're really excited to share our giant kelp forest. So in previous broadcasts, we have talked about how the job of an aquarist is really amazing because it's a very multifaceted job. And often when people talk about becoming a marine biologist, they don't always think about your career, Mike. So can you tell us a little bit about how you ended up with this really cool job?
Yeah, of course. So I went to school at the University of California, Santa Cruz. And while I was up there, I was lucky enough to do a quarter abroad in Corsica, France. And while there, I met some really wonderful people within my cohort at UC Santa Cruz, and a couple of them worked at the Seymour Marine Discovery Center, which is a small aquarium attached to UC Santa Cruz.
Very
And
cool.
with their help, I actually became a volunteer there. And then from there, I became a student employee, and then I became an employee. And it was just over time, I just fell in love with having the hands-on experience with these animals, because up until that point, I was a senior in college. I'd taken a bunch of marine biology courses, and a lot of that was very hands-off, where I was learning from a book or I was learning from a chalkboard. And so this was one of those opportunities to be able to be hands-in and get to experience things like jellyfish propagation and food prep and larval feeds and things like that. And then from there, I took a little bit of a hiatus from the aquarium world for a couple of years and moved to San Diego and worked for a company where we built and installed zebrafish systems. So zebrafish are these small fish that have about 70% comparable DNA. And so they do a lot of genetics with them to study human diseases. And so while I was there for about 3 years, I traveled around the US and Canada and basically installed these systems, maintained them, and helped researchers. And then decided I wanted to be in San Diego a little bit more often, and I started applying to Birch, and then finally got my footing here, which is exciting.
That is really awesome. I remember when you got hired, we were really excited to welcome you. And I think it's really neat that your career takes some twists and turns before you ended up where you are today. A lot of students, we have a ocean STEM career night that happens usually in April. We're going to try to get some things online for you guys this year. But a lot of students always think that it's a direct path to get exactly to what the job is you want to be. But I think your career so far shows how it can kind of get influenced by lots of different things. Really
Definitely.
Cool.
It's pretty crazy. There's a lot of people that work within this industry that have started at so many different places or just stepped away. And a lot of times it's about being persistent, because a lot of times you have to do internships or volunteer to really get your foot in the door. We have an aquarist here that started out in fisheries and then moved his way into here. We have other ones that say started in the zoo type field with terrestrial animals and then have worked their way into aquariums. I think I was always kind of leaning towards aquarium based stuff because I always loved the water. I grew up in the North Coast and spent a lot of time out there fishing and tide pooling. And then I fell in love with scuba diving, and this was kind of the best of all worlds.
It seems like such a fun, but also really challenging job at times. Oh man, looks like you guys are asking a few questions. Thanks for sending those in. Looks like Karen has a question, and she wants to know, are there any surprises from the sea dragons since the launch of your new exhibit? We opened Sea Dragons and Seahorses, a new exhibit about a year ago now. Was it a year ago already? And it's really amazing. Yeah, it's one of the largest sea dragon habitats in the world. So Mike, do you have any updates about the sea dragons?
Yeah, I believe we posted a couple of videos and stuff, but really exciting. We actually had our first successful egg transfer to a hatch. So we have a couple of juveniles that I think Caitlin and our wonderful team has put a couple of videos about those guys, and they're doing really great, which is exciting. And we've also seen a lot more courting behavior with that. So they really like that space. That's the big reason why we designed that exhibit that way, was so that they had the best opportunity to breed in captivity. And we've seen them really take to it, and we're constantly manipulating that and kind of playing with it to help enrich their lives and hopefully push forward that breeding program.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And something that I love about our sea dragon breeding program and the new exhibit is that incorporates a lot of really advanced aquarium technology. So you can imagine for the animals at the aquarium, we have lights and systems that have the water going through and things like that. But in the sea dragon exhibit, they have really special lights that change based on the time of day to mimic sunrise, sunset, and then also change based on the seasons, which is really amazing too, which I think is really neat. Do you have anything you can add to that, Mike? You probably know more than I do.
One of the things that people don't really think about with sea dragons is, and what we've found out over the years, is they're scared of the dark, actually.
Oh, really?
So one of the big things we have to do with them is we always have to make sure there's some type of small amount of ambient light. They get really stressed out if there's no light and will typically bolt to the surface. So one of our curators, Leslie, over the years has come to realize that. And so we always try to mimic natural moonlight and things along those lines just to help give them the best quality of life we can. And then with that, it also helps them with their seasons, so we can manipulate diurnal time periods, so that way they know, hopefully, when it's time to breed.
Yeah, really cool. And we have had that success this year, which we are so proud of our team with the Sea Dragon breeding program. Speaking of light, we have some really beautiful light coming into the giant kelp forest right now. Mike, can you tell us a little bit about what it might look like from the top looking down into this exhibit? It changes through the day.
Yeah, so our kelp forest is a really special exhibit because it's our only exhibit that has complete natural sunlight. Like, we have a couple of skylights on other exhibits, like a turtle exhibit, but the top of our kelp forest is wide open. And it's like that for a couple of reasons. A big one is you get this amazing effect. Like, that's what a kelp forest looks like out in the wild. That beautiful canopy look, you're looking through it, it's just gorgeous. I actually shut off the wave machine a little bit ago because I was feeding, and so that helped me target certain animals, and I forgot to turn it back on, sadly, but I'll do that in a little bit. That's okay. But with that, this natural sunlight also helps all of our algae, and so we have several different species you can see right now. In the middle, that's going to be that macrocystis, so that's our giant kelp forest. You might not realize this, but you actually use it every day. It's in things like toothpaste and ice cream and makeup. And it's a really awesome thickening agent, and it can grow 18 plus inches in a day during the right circumstances. And on the right side, just above that orange fish, we have some sea palms. And they've naturally accrued by coming in and sticking to our walls. And then if you look towards the back, you're going to see some pinks. And those are some calcareous algae, so they have a calcium-like skeleton, so they're harder, and those grow in there. So by having that natural sunlight, we're able to grow those and mimic our natural ocean. With that, we also have raw seawater, so seawater that goes through very minimal filtration before it's been pumped up from the ocean. This gives that nutrients to our algae.
Yeah, and it's really amazing that we can mimic that natural system that you would see right offshore, not only in La Jolla and San Diego, but giant kelp can be found in cold, nutrient-rich waters along the entire west coast of the United States. So it's really cool. And we are in the southern extent of the kelp forest. It can be found about halfway down into Baja California in Mexico, just south of us. But really, we have a great name over here. I know, there's our giant sea bass. She came down to say hello. Can you tell us a little bit more about that amazing fish?
Yeah, so that's our giant black sea bass. Her scientific name is Stereolepis gigas. And they're really amazing. We actually have 2 juveniles currently because one of our colleagues at another institution was actually able to breed them. And so they were able to release a bunch back out into the wild. They are endangered, and so they're protected off of our coast, which is really amazing. But over the last couple of years, we've seen a resurgence of their population. They can live 70 plus years and get over 700 pounds. We think she's roughly about 30 years old, and I'm of the mindset that she's close to 300 pounds, but there's a little bit of debate, somewhere between 250 and 300. Really amazing, though. They have this giant mouth, and they do what's called displacement. And so when they go to eat something, they actually create a vacuum. So they pop that mouth open, and it sucks everything in. So they don't really have teeth like you would think about with a shark. Supposedly, some of their favorite foods in the wild are things like round rays and halibut. Our girl's favorite thing is actually mackerel, though.
Yeah, and anyone who tuned in to see our scuba buddy feeding got to see her do that really amazing suction feeding that she likes to do. And she was definitely eating some mackerel that day. So very cool. And if you want to see it in action, go look a few videos back. We have it there for you. A lot of people commenting about how nice the kelp looks right now, wondering if we got more kelp. And actually, yes, our team was able to get more kelp. Now, Mike, I know that we have to have special permits to allow us to collect kelp. Hi, Craig. Craig used to work at the aquarium. Hi, Craig. Allow us to collect a minimal amount of kelp from the wild to help feed our animals and then also to use in this exhibit. Can you tell us a little bit more about how we have to follow the rules, but then also able to get it?
Yeah, so we have what's called a scientific collection permit. And so we work with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, or Fish and Game in California. And basically we sit down and we talk about all the different things we would potentially like to collect. And they give us really strict regulations on how much we can collect, in what vicinity we can collect, and how often. And so basically our permit is typically for every 2 to 3 years. We just re-upped ours. And in that we talked about wanting to get kelp. And so we get 2 types of our macrocystis. We get either stuff at the surface, so that canopy, which we can plant in, or we'll take full plants. And with that, we're limited to, say, 100 square feet. We can take 1 plant and the amount of which we can take. This helps so we're not depleting a resource. We're not impacting these environments. But with that, macrocystis is incredibly fast growing. So if we do cut the top, that canopy area off, like say 30 feet, typically within about 2 to 3 weeks, it can be back up at the surface and growing, and it doesn't actually harm that algae, which is pretty amazing.
And if there's one thing we do have a lot of in La Jolla, it's kelp, which we're really lucky to have. Let's see, we did have a question coming in. Somebody asked, I can't see it over there right now, but somebody asked, what does a typical day for you look like, Mike? And I know it differs every day. You're doing something else. We're asking you to do this today, so that's part of your job card. But what does a typical day look like for an aquarist? Oh, there we go. Thanks for finding it.
Before all of this, it was a little less chaotic, but it's really good. So I'm sure you guys have probably heard, we've split up teams. So that way half of our team is working one half of the week, the other half, the second half of the week, just so we're always covered. So the aquarium stays safe and our animals stay safe. But my typical coverage, so we have several galleries throughout the aquarium. And that can be broken down to, say, our local gallery, Pacific Northwest, our tropical gallery, our Seahorses, our Shark Reef, along with other areas outside of that. And so between us aquarists that are here, we split that up into our responsibilities. So my responsibilities right now for today are the kelp forest, as well as our seahorse and seahorse propagation. And so my typical day comes in, and we all do rounds every morning and every evening. And so we start out, we take temperatures, we make sure flows are good, our animals are happy and healthy, checking all of those exhibits. And then from there, I go into our seahorse propagation room. I do our morning cleaning. So I'm cleaning those tanks to make sure our seahorses are happy and healthy, checking all of those. And then I do my morning rounds and feed. So I feed all of our seahorses in the AM. And then on a day like today, on Thursday, we'll prep, and then I'll feed the kelp forest about midday. And then I'll start over kind of on that seahorse stuff. Along with that, I do other little things throughout, like cleaning filter socks or cleaning tanks a little bit more thoroughly, wiping windows. But kind of the meat and potatoes of my day is definitely going to be cleaning those seahorse tanks and feeding those animals twice daily.
Yeah, and it's a lot of work, especially anyone who's working with the seahorses. Seahorses, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but they don't have a true stomach like we do. They kind of have one big long digestive tract, and so they have to eat a lot and kind of all day long. So is that something that you guys take into account?
Yeah, definitely. So they have like in the scheme of things, they have a really short digestive tract. So it just basically forms this little loop and comes down. And so I always correlate them to the shrews. So if people know anything about shrews in the terrestrial world, they need to constantly be eating or they can starve. If they don't eat within 24 hours, basically they don't have enough energy to continue. With seahorses, we have a little bit more wiggle room than that, but definitely they need to almost constantly be eating. So with that, we'll feed them in the morning and the afternoon. We feed pretty heavy in the morning, so that way they're kind of foraging for the next, say, hour to 2 hours. And then in the afternoon, we feed as well. And so that usually gives us a nice, say, 6-hour window between feeding. And then that next like 12 to 16 hours of fasting is really good for them as well. Because just like you or me, they can get a little pudgy or a little overweight, which happens. So we want to mitigate that too, right? So it's always a give and a take. We want to make sure our animals are getting the necessary caloric needs that they have, but at the same time not going overboard with that.
Right, right. And I could see how there's a whole science to that to make sure you get it right. Mary has a question that's actually a great follow-up that she's asking, do you feed all of the fish every day? So I don't think you personally, but you, our Aquarius team, feed all of the fish every day.
So our seahorses get fed the most often, and then a lot of times our larval things, so like newly hatched or newly born seahorses will feed multiple times throughout the day, or larval fish, like we have some saddleback clowns that were born last week, and so we feed those guys daily or multiple times throughout the day. But a lot of our other galleries, we try not to feed them quite that much, because you think about it, our tropical gallery we will feed a bit more, so typically we're feeding in that range of about 5 days a week and feeding kind of light and then a couple heavy days, because they are tropical and the metabolism is going to be a little bit higher. But like our Pacific Northwest, where our water temperature is in the high 30s, those fish don't need to be fed every day because they're not burning the same number of calories and they're not moving as much. And so a lot of times with most of our colder galleries, we'll feed those 3 days a week. Our kelp forest gets fed 4 days a week. Our shark exhibit on the other side of the aquarium gets fed 3 days a week. So somewhere in that 3 days a week plus.
Mm-hmm. And oftentimes that mimics what things would be like for them in the wild as well. So it's really amazing that people who work for zoos and aquariums often learn a lot from people who are studying these animals in the field, but then also vice versa. So it's really amazing to work at a place like Birch Aquarium, being affiliated with Scripps Oceanography and UC San Diego, because we're always learning from the scientists, but at the same time, the scientists at UC San Diego and Scripps can be learning from us. So it's a really neat give and take when it comes to not only caring for our animals, but some of our research projects like our sea dragon breeding program as well. So that's really neat. Let's see, do we have any questions about maybe our giant kelp forest? We had another question about the giant sea bass. I noticed your giant sea bass is often at the top of her exhibit. Do you guys know, is there a reason why she's always hanging out up near the surface?
So I have some guesses with that. I don't know for sure, but I'll make some educated guesses if you guys are okay with that. So she did point out a really great thing, that a lot of our other groupers typically stay towards the bottom, like our broomtails in that exhibit or our broomtails in Tank 20 with our turtle. She typically likes to sit right in the outflow from our wave machine. So she's usually as close to that as possible. So I think she really likes that. A lot of times when water's being tumbled and stuff like that, it's like the highest oxygenated water in the tank. So maybe that feels good with her. At night, she will come down though.
Yeah.
And a lot of times at night, she'll be towards the bottom. On an occasion, you'll see her kind of rub, because every now and then fish get little creepy crawlies on them. And so they want to itch those. It just happens. It's the same thing that happened in the wild. So she'll rub on the rocks and stuff like that. And then I'm not 100% certain with that. During certain times of the year, though, she'll get really big spots, and that's typically when she's holding eggs. And that's how we know she's a female, is because we've seen her release eggs. And so when she has those big spots, she basically won't come down for anything, except for at night when she's rubbing on the bottom. The other time she comes down is when we have divers in the water and we're feeding her because she's learned to target on the divers. I think she really likes to flow up there and likes that amount of motion. So that would be my educated guess, but I could be wrong. So
it's hard to ask her to tell us personally, but that definitely makes a lot of sense. And for anyone who's wondering where that wave machine is, it looks like somebody else turned it on. Thank you, whoever did that. It is in the upper right. Upper right, it's so confusing on this thing, guys. The upper right of where we are looking right now on the screen. And we mentioned a little bit earlier, but if you want to see the behind the scenes of that, we posted on Facebook and Instagram a great video of Mike showing us that wave machine. Let's see. Oh, somebody's saying hello from Carlsbad. Hi, Omar from Carlsbad. That's here in San Diego, if anyone else is viewing from other places. Oh, and hi, Amy, another member of our Aquarist team saying hello. Let's see. And guys, be sure to ask us more questions about the kelp forest or anything else about the ocean or Birch Aquarium. We had one come in. Oh, yes. Oh, and from Scripps. Yay. We love our team at Scripps. Thanks for supporting, guys. One other really cool thing that Mike is a part of that is an important thing for Scripps Institution of Oceanography. For anyone who's viewing from out of town, Birch Aquarium, we are the public outreach center for Scripps Institution of Oceanography. In the Scripps Oceanography Charter, more than 100 years ago, they said there always had to be a public aquarium or a public outreach center affiliated with the research institution. So that is us today. And we still play a role in helping Scripps take some really neat samples from the research pier that's located in La Jolla. It's the Ellen Browning Scripps Memorial Pier. And if anyone has ever been to La Jolla Shores Beach, you've seen the pier down there. And Mike, can you tell us a little bit about the pier readings or the samples that you guys take every day for them?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the really amazing things about being part of this institution, like Caitlin was saying, is our connection with Scripps as well as UC San Diego. And so one of the things we get to do as aquarists, because we're here 365, so we're here every day because our animals need us, so that's holidays and everything, is we get to help with some sampling. And so that sampling happens at the end of that pier. And so we take two samples. We take a surface sample of water, and we check that temperature, as well as we take a bottle of it. And then we take a bottom sample. So we have a thing called a Niskin bottle where we can actually drop it down. It's open on the top and bottom, and then it closes. And we can then bring that up and take a bottom sample. These are really important because this set of data that we're collecting, those temperature readings, have been happening since 1916. So a really long time. So 104 years. So it makes it so that when we look and we're like, oh, the temperature of the ocean has steadily been rising, we have 100 years to say, like, hey, look, we've been taking these samples roughly every day for the last 104 years, and we can show this trajectory. Our bottom sample is a little bit older. I believe it's from like 1925 or 1926. Mm-hmm. So with that, we try to take that sample at the same time each day, somewhere between that 10 and 2 o'clock. Our schedule is a little bit flexible, and they're pretty flexible with us, but it's important. And then along with that, they'll check things like salinity as well as some other water chemistry attributes with it. But it makes it really great because very few data sets on the planet have been going on for over 100 years. And so it's amazing to have one of those right off of our coast.
Yeah. And it's really, really, as Mike was saying, important not only historically, but also understanding how time in the ocean is very different than human time. Changes in the ocean don't happen in a season or even in a few years. There are 10-year cycles, 100-year cycles, even cycles that are on the scale of thousands of years that go on with our planet. So to get a better understanding of those changes, having really long time to understand it makes a really big difference. So we're really proud of that. We had a very special person say hello. Beth, who works at Birch Aquarium, her daughter Beverly says hi. Hi, Beverly. We're so happy to see you guys watching. Oh, man, that's really great. So let's see. Oh, we have a great question from Caroline. What are the oldest and youngest fish at the aquarium currently? This is a little bit tricky. I don't know if we have an exact answer, but
so I would say our youngest fish, not the ones currently in eggs, are saddleback clowns, and I collected them last Wednesday.
I'm going to see if I can find a picture of a saddleback
Yeah,
clown.
so they are just over a week old, a week and 1 day old. The oldest fish is really difficult. Our moray eels, we're thinking they're 40 plus years old. Our black sea bass is 30 plus, we're going to say. We have some Boccaccio that we had gotten in the 90s. We have some blacksmith, which if you look in the kelp forest right now, they're the same shape as our Garibaldi. There's one swimming right in the middle towards the right-hand side. They just turned around. Perfect. And they, I believe, are from the original aquarium, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So we do definitely have some older fish in the aquarium. I would probably have to say, though, our moray eels are some of the oldest.
Definitely. Is this the type of fish that you were talking about? Yeah. This clownfish?
Exactly. Excellent. Yeah. So we have several of those in tank 29, and they have their really amazing anemone that they live with. And so they've been reproducing like crazy. What's really interesting about these guys, though, is the ones that we had gotten at Birch were captive reared. So traditionally, anemone fish are really easy to breed in captivity. And so we got some that were bred in captivity. They'd never seen an anemone before. So we were really worried about putting them in the tank with the anemone that we have because it's incredibly aggressive. It stings like crazy. The aquarists who have worked with it and gotten touched by it, we've gotten rashes. They're known fish eaters, so very, very timid to put them together. And so we slowly introduced them, and they did this really amazing behavior where they actually went forward and they barely touched their nose into the anemone. And they would do this, and they did that for about an hour. Then after that hour, they kind of got used to it, and then they started gently touching their sides to it, gently touching their sides. And within about 24 to 48 hours from doing that, they had gained that immunity and gotten the anemone used to their slime coat, and they were starting to basically cover themselves in it. And they can go inside and outside of it and not get stung at all, which is incredible.
That's such a cool story. I didn't know that. How fun. Really fun. Oh, man. I'm really glad you told us about that cool fish. Another animal that we have at the aquarium that it can be pretty old are some of the corals that we have in our collection. People often think corals are plants because they look kind of different to us, but they are animals. And I believe Fernando told me some of our corals we've had since, at least 30 years or so from the old Scripps aquarium. So that's pretty cool too.
So yeah, we have a couple of tongue corals that are very old. I don't know exactly how old they are. And corals are really difficult too because they can do asexual reproduction. So we do a lot of fragging. And so it's called fragmenting. And that's one of the ways we propagate corals and one of the ways they're working to save coral reefs. And so corals are really amazing because it's a colonial animal. So you can have all these branches and they have individual polyps on them. So they look like little flowers. And if we break off a branch and it has multiple polyps on it, then from that small branch, we can grow a whole new colony. And so that's one of the ways we propagate. And so some of these colonies we have gone from a single branch to hundreds. And we don't know how many times that coral, say, has been fragmented over its lifetime. Because it could potentially be 30, 40, 50 plus years old. There's some brain corals out in the ocean that they think are several hundred to maybe 1,000 years old.
Really amazing. Coral is such a cool creature. Let's see. I'm going to see who is asking us some questions. Oh, lots of aquarium staff tuning in. Hi, guys. Thank you for your support. For most of us who are not on the Aquarist team are working from home these days. Kristen has a question on behalf of Colton, who is 6 years old. Hi, Colton. Colton loves sharks. Do you have any sharks there? And I know we do have some really cool sharks in our giant kelp forest that we're looking at today. Can you tell us a little bit more, Mike, about the sharks that we have in the giant kelp forest?
Yeah. Hey, Colton. We do. We have several shark species. Actually, if you look on the kelp forest right now, you can see one swimming over on the right-hand side, and that is our leopard sharks. And we get them in really large amounts during August, September in our La Jolla Shores, La Jolla Cove area. It's called the Marine Room, and it's basically a lot of pregnant females that come into the area. Along with that, we have some benthic sharks that are on the bottom of our kelp forest, and they actually lay eggs similar like a chicken. So we have our swell sharks, And so those little eggs that we'll show, and we have different programs where we work with them, you can actually candle them, and so you can see the yolk, or you can see that baby developing inside of them. And they have a really fun name called mermaid's purses, and so that's what they actually call the eggs of these swell sharks. Along with that, we have another shark species that lays eggs in our kelp forest called the horn shark, and they're awesome. And they have this amazing egg case that looks like a corkscrew, and they'll actually push that into the kelp holdfast or down into the sand. We find them pushed between rocks, and so they'll push those eggs down there to protect that baby developing inside as it develops over the months. And then with that, we also have another shark, we have two other shark species, if I'm not mistaken, maybe more. We have our smooth hound, which looks very similar to our leopard shark, but it's more of like a silver. So it looks very sharky. So when you think of a shark, it looks sharky. And then possibly my favorite shark is our angel shark. And so they're actually a compressed species. So they're dorsally ventrally compressed. So their back and their bottom get squished together. They kind of look like a pancake. And so they lay in the sand, and they're ambush predators. So if you think of a ray, very similar kind of body shape, but the difference is their eyes for our angel sharks are up on top, and then their mouth, they're a predator that lunges up to eat things. And so you can think of it very cryptic, so they camouflage. So a lot of reptiles, snakes do the same thing where they'll sit, wait to ambush. And that's what our angel sharks do.
So cool. I was able to find a picture real quick on the internet of a swell shark egg case. So any locals, if you've ever seen these mermaid's purses or swell shark egg cases, let us know in the comments. Sometimes you can find them washed up on the beach or in the tide pools, or even see them, like Mike was saying, in our giant kelp forest. But this is the candling, or holding a light up behind it. Mike, do you want to tell them a little bit about what you're looking at?
Yeah, definitely. So you can actually see, if you look at the top of that egg case, you're going to see the shark's head, and then I'm pretty certain that's an eye, that dark spot. And then as you follow that, it kind of corkscrews. That's actually their body. So they're going to have something similar to like an umbilical cord, and then the dark spot on the bottom is their yolk. And as they develop, initially, you're just going to see this little almost feather on the side of the yolk, and the yolk's going to take up a fair bit of that mermaid's purse. And then over time, that yolk shrinks and shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. And you see that baby's going to envelope inside of there and take up that space. And then finally, what will happen is once it's taken up all that space and it's grown as much as it can, it'll actually push out. Another really cool thing is if you look at the top, you can see it looks almost like wire, and then there's some underneath the thumb. Those are called tendrils, and our sharks actually use those to wrap them around the base of our kelp forest, or wrap them around different things. That way it holds the egg in place as it develops over, say, the 9 to 12 months over time, kind of depending on the temperature of the water.
Yeah, really cool. And we do have an exhibit within our Hall of Fishes in our nursery area that has these exact type of egg cases lit up from behind. So you can see the baby sharks in there. And my favorite is, if you look closely, sometimes you can see the baby sharks wiggling their tails, which are really cute. And everybody always goes, oh, when they see the babies when they come out, because they're only about this big. And then I am just trying to pull up real quick too. I have a photo of a horn shark with their egg cases, because it's very cool to see the horn shark eggs. They look a little bit different than that of a swell shark. Oh, here we go. Let's see if we can get that guy up. So there's our horn sharks that Mike was talking about, with that different looking egg case, quite different from that of the swell shark. Can you tell us about this cool egg case?
Yeah, so that's that corkscrew looking one. And then really quick, with the horn shark, if you look, the two dorsal fins, so if you look at its eyes and you go back, it has two dorsal fins. There's actually a horn or a spine on each of those, and so that's where it gets its name. So these egg cases, basically what the female will do is she'll push down in the back, and as she's releasing that egg, it'll push it down into the sand, into the rocks, into algae, and that'll help hold it in place, that corkscrew shape.
Yeah, it's really neat. And horn sharks are an example of a little bit extra maternal care for a shark, but not that much. Nancy has a question. Once the eggs are laid and the egg case is planted, is the mother shark's job done?
Yeah, basically with sharks, I don't know of any shark species where there's any kind of maternal instinct, but sharks are amazing for reproduction. They do everything.
Yeah.
So they have placental vivipary. So just like us, there will be a placenta basically, or aplacental vivipary. They'll have ones where they'll basically have a baby developing inside, and then the mother will release unfertilized eggs, and the baby will eat those inside of the mother while she develops. It's just all kinds of crazy stuff. So if you're interested in reproduction, sharks are the way to go. It's so cool.
Really cool. Oops, sorry, I got rid of that real quick. Sharks are super cool, and I feel like if you've had 450 million years of evolution, your bodies are going to come up some novel ways to have new babies.
Can I add one thing with that?
Oh, yeah. Go for it, Mike.
So our swell sharks are part of a family called cat sharks. And so there's a couple of different tropical species. There was a new species of cat shark, I think in either 2012 or 2014, found off Galapagos. But they're also really interesting because this species or this family of sharks can do something called parthenogenesis. And so basically it's virgin birth. And so a female shark can reproduce without a male being present. And so they've seen it in several different aquariums. And I think we've seen it one time here. I don't know if we got the testing back, but we were basically doing genetic testing to see if that was the case.
Whoa, that's really amazing. I didn't hear about that cool shark. Man, guys, the ocean is amazing. We have so much more to learn. Oh, so cool. Let's see. Caroline has another question. Mike, what are your favorite animals to feed at the aquarium?
Oh, it's hard. It changes, right? One of my favorites is definitely our giant black sea bass. Getting to dive in the kelp forest and hand feeding her is amazing.
Whoa.
I also get the opportunity to feed with a couple of our other aquarists, our loggerhead sea turtle, and that's really fun and spectacular when she's not being picky, because she can be a little finicky every now and then. But when I had our local gallery, we have what's called a scythe butterfly, and it's this really amazing temperate butterfly species. It's absolutely gorgeous. It used to be our logo, at Birch, and they loved squid tentacles, and so I'd cut up squid tentacles specifically for them and feed them, and I really enjoyed that.
Really cool. Another thing about that scythe butterfly fish is the reason it was our old logo is because that was actually a type of fish that was discovered by Scripps Institution of Oceanography scientists down in Baja, down in Mexico. So it's a really cool species of fish that we have in the Hall of Fishes. So when we're all able to go back and visit again, we'll have to take a look, and we'll see if we can maybe find a photo to share a little bit later of our scythe butterflies. Their exhibit is a little dim compared to some of our others, but that's the way they like it. Let's see. You guys have had some great questions so far. I had a question, Mike, about the Garibaldi fish that we can kind of see in this exhibit. There's one Garibaldi fish that likes to hang out in front of the rock on the right over there. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that fish
is? With our Garibaldi. So if you look at those orange fish swimming around, we actually have a point down in La Jolla called Goldfish Point for those guys. They're not goldfish. They are damsels. And so they're actually our California State marine fish is our Garibaldi, and its scientific name's Hypsipops rubicundus, kind of a fun name. I always mispronounce it, so don't quote me. But if you look down on that rock on that right-hand side, you can see part of it's red. And so our Garibaldi, especially our male Garibaldis, are little farmers. And so what he's doing is he's planting a crop. And so he's growing that red algae. And he's not necessarily growing it to eat. What he's doing is he's growing it to impress a female. So with some bird species making nests or penguins grabbing rocks, our Garibaldi grows a nest. And so he grows a nest of this red algae. And so depending on how big that nest is and how clean that nest is, he's going to have females more interested in him. And so if a female is interested in that nest and she lays her eggs there, he'll then fertilize them. And then he's a really good dad. And so he'll take care of those eggs. He'll constantly be cleaning them, blowing water on them, brushing against it to make sure no silt, sediment, anything like that's touching them. And along with that, if anything comes within about 4 to 5 feet of him, he's going to attack it. So not the biggest fish in the aquarium, but definitely has got a lot of personality. On occasion, we will collect some of those eggs, and so we swim in there with the turkey baster. And from the moment you hit the water, he knows. And so he'll come up and attack you. And he really likes going for the places where there's skin exposed. So typically when we're diving, we have neoprene hoods, so they cover our hairline. And then we have masks, but we have this little bit of hair, or skin right here. And he's really good at biting that part. And so we've had a couple of people come out with little Garibaldi love bites. And that's pretty funny. So this little pit bull of a fish likes to push us away. And then you also see him do it with, say, the black sea bass or our leopard sharks or any of our other fish in there as well. And during multiple times throughout the breeding season, the female will come down there and lay eggs, and he does a great job. We actually have a couple of nests in the kelp forest, but that's the only one that's visible. We have one on the top left, and we have another on the right-hand side, but it's kind of buried behind.
Excellent. Very cool. And I think that he's just doing his best to be a good dad. He wants to make sure those eggs are safe. But the challenge is that if we left the eggs in there to hatch within this exhibit, those babies, when they hatch out, they would become delicious snacks for some of the other animals. They would be food. And this exhibit is not designed to grow teeny tiny baby fish. I mean, are they maybe like a half an inch when they come out of their eggs? They're really small.
Yeah, smaller than that. I would say like a couple of millimeters. Like they're really, really difficult species to even rear in captivity. So a lot of times saltwater species are really difficult to rear because the food web starts at such a small level in the ocean. And so a lot of times these larval fish are eating microscopic zooplankton, so little animals. But in order for us to grow those little animals, we also have to grow phytoplankton, so basically little single-cell plants. And so we're growing that algae to then grow this zooplankton to then feed these larval fish. So it's these multiple steps, and it's really, really difficult.
Right. One of the many challenges of your guys' job is not just feeding the animals, but figuring out how to feed mouths of all sizes. I can't even imagine. And something else too is that Vince, who you were talking about before, another member of our Aquarist team, we actually have a video of him collecting some of those Garibaldi eggs with the turkey baster, which I think is an amazing Aquarist multitasker. It seems like you guys use turkey basters for
all the time.
So we'll be sharing that video out, I believe, over the weekend. So keep an eye out to see Vince collecting those Garibaldi eggs. And let's see. Oh my gosh, it's already been more than 40 minutes that we've been talking to you guys. If anybody has any last minute questions, please go ahead and submit them. And then Mike, I really wanted to say thank you for taking some time out of your busy day. I know you guys are extra busy right now with the change schedules, so we really appreciate it. Let's see. Oh, we got one question. Would you guys ever put a white sea bass into the kelp forest exhibit?
Fisher, that's a great question. So we've done it in the past. The hard part is they get really aggressive, and so they're big time predators. So same thing with like our tank 20. We've done yellowtail in there as well. It's hard with those species because we feed those tanks a lot, and we try to mitigate any kind of predation in the exhibits. But with an animal like that, they're so prey motivated that things flash and they just want to keep going at stuff. And so maybe again we'll try it in the future, but it's a hard thing because it's a give and a take. We want all of our animals to live the best life they can, and we want to mitigate the amount of predation that we have in our exhibits. But they're an incredible species.
They are. I actually worked on a really cool project. I worked at Hub SeaWorld Research Institute for a while, and that's a place that we work with them often with their fisheries team who are studying the white sea bass. And what their team was doing is they were growing up baby white sea bass to help put back into the wild to replenish the population that had been overfished. And what they were doing is they were putting small acoustic pinger tags inside these white sea bass. And so when the scientists wanted to go back out to research the fish to try to figure out where are these guys going once we release them back out into the wild. So they'd go out with a special tool to put in the water to listen in, and the fish would go beep, 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 and they'd be able to locate the fish. The challenge was that they'd go out to locate the fish and they'd hear beep, 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 and they get closer and closer and closer, and a harbor seal would pop up. And they said, oh, okay, well, I guess that fish got eaten by a harbor seal. And then, okay, we'll find another one. They'd go find another one. Beep, beep, beep. It was a sea lion. And so they were having a big problem with, they were finding more pinnipeds or seals and sea lions with the having swallowed those fish that had the acoustic tags in there. And so it was our job to figure out, was putting the acoustic tags inside the fish, like ringing a dinner bell for those really smart seals and sea lions, where the seals and sea lions figuring out that the fish that were pinging were easy to find. So we figured out that, yes, the seals and sea lions could hear the pingers. So we had to find a different tool to track those white sea bass when they were released back into the wild. It was a fun project to work on. And just another one of those cool conservation stories coming out of San Diego. Anyway, guys, is there anything, Mike, you want to finish up to say to everyone? Thank you again for coming on.
Yeah, I have two things. So we talked about the turkey baster and how useful that tool is. Something people might not realize is probably one of our most used tools at the aquarium is actually a blender. And so we go through blenders pretty rapidly. You wouldn't want any of the margaritas we're making because we actually blend up things like krill or mackerel or different things for our corals or our filter feeders and things like that. So we got a pretty gross blender, but it's a great tool. And then with that, I just want to say thank you guys for logging on today. It was really enjoyable getting to chit chat, and hopefully I answered you guys' questions. Stay safe out there, and then hopefully all of our friends at Rady's Children's Hospital were able to watch some of this, and if they were, we're thinking about you guys, and I can't wait for this stuff to be over to see all of you here.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And thank you again, Mike. And we will see you guys again next week, Tuesday at 10, I believe, is our next one. So we'll talk to you then. Thanks, guys. Bye, bye, bye.
Bye.